All right, I think it's time to get started. Welcome everyone to the Welcome to Regenerative Agronomy webinar. Thanks so much for joining us today. And I'm Shelley. I'm the Communication Coordinator for NutriSoil, and it's been a real pleasure to be able to work with a great team of people to bring this event together today. But a big special thanks to NutriSoil for sponsoring this day and getting all these people together. So just a bit of housekeeping before we get started. I'm just showing you this because at the top of your screen, there's a little green badge with a tick, and to the right of that, there is a view button there. If you click on that, then you can change that to speaker view, and that will probably allow everything to flow a little bit better at your end. So what is the NutriSoil Hub Care program? So for anyone that buys 1,000 litres or more of NutriSoil or 5 tonnes more of NutriSoil castings, you can automatically go in the NutriSoil Hub. So in that hub, we provide extra support to farmers to help them on their journey, whatever that journey is for them, but to help them to reduce synthetic inputs and increase biological inputs so that they have a more holistic farming system. So the first thing we do is we ask you to do a Reboot My Soil course, and David runs that Reboot My Soil course. It goes for 6 weeks and it's over Zoom. It's an hour and a half a week, and you go through a soil test and you learn how to read that quite well and in a biological context as well, and how biology can help with how it interacts with the physical and chemical properties of the soil. We have our Hub Care team, which I'll introduce you to in a moment. And one other support mechanism we have there is you can have a one-on-one session. It might be a visit if you live close to one of our Hub Care team members, or it'll be a Zoom, and you can ask them questions and you can put a soil action plan together. And just have whatever support you need, they can provide you that as an annual thing that we fund for you. And obviously, you can pick up the phone and call us at NutriSoil anytime, and we'll provide as much help as we can. But that program is there to help you on your journey. So today, the webinar is open to everyone, so you can get a little bit of a taste of our Hub Care team and what we provide and what regenerative agriculture, what we believe it is. So I'm going to introduce the team, then I'm going to hand over to David, who will then facilitate the rest of this event. So we have I'll just stop sharing. Oh no, I'll leave that as is. So we've got David from Soil Land Food, who facilitates our courses and does our events with us, which is fantastic. We've also got Nakala, who is the CEO of NutriSoil. We've got the amazing Robin Tate, who's over in Tassie, and she's just been a great asset down there. We have Luke Harrington from Regen Farming, who has a long history with us and is doing wonderful things. And also Simon Matson, who's up in Queensland up there, and yeah, has got a background in plant diversity. And they all bring different skills, different perspective to the team, but they're all integral in helping our hub members in their journey. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and invite David to take over the reins.
Oh, thanks very much, Shelley. G'day, everyone. Thanks for that introduction, and welcome everyone to this Regenerative Agronomy webinar with the team, and hopefully we can explore some ideas for you in doing agronomy differently. I guess regenerative agronomy is at the heart of like making changes to regenerative agriculture if you're in broad scale grazing and cropping. And so over this year, we'll have a few events where we'll kind of dig deeper into regenerative agronomy and kind of the parts to it and how to apply it. So that's where we're going today. Just bear with me a minute while I organise my screen a little bit. So it's a bit easier. Thank you. All right, so let's kick off. I guess I'm just going to do sort of 5 to 10 minutes sort of setting the scene, maybe talking about what is regenerative agronomy, like what is agronomy and what's regenerative versus conventional agronomy. And then I'm going to introduce the four guys, the four regen agronomists that you've briefly met to, and then they're going to go through program on a case study property that we have with Chris Stanmore's place. So Chris is going to share us a bit of info, and the guys are going to kind of give you an outline of how they'd approach this agronomic job to help Chris sort of go down a more regenerative approach while still making money off the enterprise. So that's where we're headed today. If you have any questions, then please put them into chat, because we're a really big group. So turning on your mic will probably throw out the process. But if you do have questions, please put them into chat so we can capture them and address them for you. The team, the Brains Trust, can, address them for you. So let's jump into it. I thought I'd just start with what agronomy is, and here's Simon doing a bit of agronomy up when he used to grow a fair few different crops under irrigation in central Queensland. Agronomy is the science and practice of soil management and plant production. That's the official definition. The science and practice of soil management and plant production. Basically, it's how we grow crops and pastures, pretty much. And that's what agronomists are in the business of, trying to help farmers and graziers grow better crops and pastures so they're more profitable, more resilient businesses. That's it in a nutshell. And I guess in the world of regen ag versus conventional ag, you've kind of got different approaches to agronomy, like different agronomists approach agronomy differently, just like different doctors approach your health differently. And there are some common ground, though. So I thought I'd start with some of the common ground between the two. The first thing is that both regen and conventional agronomy pretty much are both aiming for high-yielding crops and pastures. That's what we're in the business of doing, is growing food and fibre. And the second goal that I guess both would argue they're trying to achieve is healthy crops and pastures. So not just yielding well, but keeping your crops and pastures healthy, minimal problems. So that's kind of the shared goals, I guess, of agronomists. And the other thing that agronomy kind of has in common to some extent is that there's a kind of model, if you like, which is sometimes called the plant soil system. That's the jargon you sort of sometimes see around what it is you're dealing with in the paddock. So obviously you're dealing with climate, like rainfall, temperature, humidity and wind on the paddock, and they're going to influence things that are going on in the season. You've got the physical conditions that you have to deal with, which is the soil, the type of soil, any soil issues, and pretty much every soil in agriculture has issues. If it doesn't, then you must be retired. And the site, like, is it sloping, north facing, is it wet, a wet area? All of those things influence your agronomy. And the third sort of side of things that in that kind of model that you're looking at to deal with is obviously the plants themselves, the genetics, the breed, the variety, all those kind of things. Then all the microbes that are around, the bacteria, fungi and everything else that's out there, and insects, which often are pests in the conventional approach, and then animals might be in the system. They might be feral animals, or they might be domesticated grazing animals that you've got in the system. So that model of how we're looking at the paddock and what we're trying to manage is pretty similar between the two. But there are a couple of key differences, and I thought I'd just sort of highlight those differences briefly, because you'll hopefully see these differences come out when the regen agronomy guys are talking through their programs and through the year. But basically, the climate's pretty much the same, whatever type of agronomy you're doing. You've got to deal with humidity and wind and all this stuff. When it comes to the physical side of things, I guess one of the big differences is that in regenerative agronomy, you're taking a more holistic approach to your soil. You're usually, and we can dive deeper into this as we go through today and, in the following follow-up sessions. But yeah, I guess regenerative ag takes a more holistic view of the soil and really puts soil health and soil biology much more on an equal footing with chemistry and physics. Whereas in conventional agronomy, in my experience, it's not an equal. It's a poor cousin. It's a second cousin, really. If it's at the Christmas lunch at all. And then you've got the biological side of things, which is dealing with the plants and the genetics of the plants, and then obviously the microbes, the pests, the pathogens, the fungal diseases, the insects in the crop and animals. And I guess the regenerative approach is a little bit different in that we often focus on the beneficials or the things that are doing good things in the paddock, not just the bad. the rat bags that are doing bad things like pests and pathogens, which often is the big focus of conventional agronomy. In regenerative or biological agronomy, we're kind of looking at the beneficials and how we can encourage them to not just doing the big stick approach, but also the carrot approach at the same time, so to speak. So I like to use this model of the agronomy model where the paddock is an ecosystem where you've got plants photosynthesizing and all of life all interacting. And it's a bit of a different approach than the sort of plant soil system passive approach to a lot of conventional agronomy. I won't say all conventional agronomy, but a lot of it. I guess the other thing to compare the two is in agronomy, when you're doing agronomy, obviously there's three kind of areas that you're working on as an agronomist. The first one is what inputs you might be recommending to your client and as a farmer or grazier that you're using, whether they be soil amendments, fertilisers, herbicides, fungicides, etc. And then the plants themselves, what variety, what genetics should we be aiming for, and the paddock operations, machinery, crop rotations, weed management, all of those things, the practical side of paddock management. So there's kind of three areas that as an agronomist you're kind of having to think about and work with when you're working with your growers. But I guess in the regenerative world, the ones I put in green are kind of like these sort of areas where there are some big differences. So in regenerative agronomy, we bring in things like biostimulants and inoculants. We don't just worry about fertilizers and lime and stuff. We kind of go way beyond that because we're trying to build a really high-functioning paddock ecosystem, focusing on the beneficial microbes and getting them to help us, if you like, create a balanced environment. So there's these extra tools, if you like, extra ways to spend money, you could argue, that you can use in terms of your inputs. And the other thing in terms of plant management is that we really focus a lot on mixes of plants, not just single monocultures. That's probably one of the big differences too. There's probably a few other things, but it's just a bit of a quick summary for you on regenerative agronomy and the kind of parts to the agronomic kind of puzzle that we're dealing with. So there's common ground between them and there's differences. If I kind of sum it up, sort of thinking about it, conventional versus regenerative agronomy, this is a farm trial in the Riverina just recently last year, out not far from Albury, where they're looking at different approaches. Conventional agronomy creates a simplified, stressed paddock. So the end result of doing what I call mainstream conventional or industrial agronomy is you end up with a simplified, stressed paddock ecosystem where a plant's natural ability to grow and feed itself and stay healthy is severely compromised. So you pretty much force the plant to be highly dependent on lots of inputs. So it's unfortunately the end result of a management system, of an agronomic approach, and the plant's natural ability to grow, because plants have been growing for about nearly 500 million years, so they kind of have worked it out. But what we do is we tend to stress them out and really disturb the system. So we get this compromised system, the simplified, stressed out, and as a result, you need to use lots of inputs to support the plant and keep it alive. And those inputs are usually things that kill everything apart from the plant. And those inputs and the disturbance you're doing usually stresses the whole thing out even more. And that leads to a more and more problems, which need more and more inputs. So you kind of get on a bandwagon, and I'm sure many of you know what that bandwagon is, where you need higher rates of inputs, you get resistance to chemicals, you get varieties that are not as good performing as old varieties. You get a whole lot of symptoms, which I'm sure we don't need to go into, but it's just the outcome of doing what I call mainstream high input conventional agronomy. It does get a result. It can get a short-term profit, but it does come at a fair few costs, which is why a lot of people look to try and change, I guess. If we look at that versus regenerative agronomy, I guess just to compare them broadly, regenerative agronomy aims to create a diverse, balanced paddock ecosystem, so one that's less stressed. And what we're trying to do is create an environment where the plant's natural ability to grow and feed itself and stay healthy is actually enhanced. So you're actually trying to work with the plant I like to think of regenerative agronomy as like vegan agronomy, like it's plant-based agronomy where plants are doing most of the work for you. You're just helping the plant. So if you don't like vegans, then just chill out because you've got to work with plants, plant-based agronomy. So we're trying to create a positive environment, if you like, which it is a stress environment. It's agriculture. We're doing stuff, we're growing crops and pastures. It's not a perfect natural system, but we're trying to create a more balanced system where the plant can actually do most of the heavy lifting for you in terms of growing and maintaining its immune system, etc. The end result, when you get it right, is you need less inputs to support the plant, and the inputs you use are usually used to support crops and pastures to maintain themselves. And you don't need as many biocides, herbicides, fungicides. You need to use less things that kill everything, basically. So we're in the business of reducing things that kill everything. I know the rest of the world loves all these wars and all this stuff, but we're actually in the opposite game here. So the end approach is that we're trying to get a high functioning environment, including the soil environment, where there's less agronomic issues so that these guys can actually take a holiday or earn less money. I know Luke wants to earn less money in life. So, we're trying to get to the point where there's less agronomic issues to deal with. So your agronomist can do yoga or something like that. You've got time to go and do yoga. So that's pretty much conventional versus regenerative agronomy. I know that there's a broad spectrum of agronomists, and I personally have been mentored by some really amazing, what we call conventional agronomists, who were quite holistic in their thinking. So I know I'm kind of putting two, labels on two ends of the spectrum. But the bottom line is that it's about what approaches you're taking, and there are some really good conventional agronomists, and there's maybe some not so holistic regenerative agronomists as well. So it's about someone's approach to creating a high functioning environment. So if I just sum it up before we jump into some nitty gritty and see how some of the guys are doing agronomy on the case study today, some of the key differences just to think about is that in a regenerative approach, we sort of take the opinion that plants are proactively involved in their survival. They haven't been waiting 400 million years for someone to come along and keep them alive. So they are in a two-way relationship with their environment. So yes, they get attacked by insects and all the rest of it, but in the other side to it, they actually contribute biochemically to modify their environment on all sorts of levels, and they can help build the soil, maintain it in a high balanced state. Or there's a two-way relationship, and plants, if you give them a chance, can actually not just survive but thrive. But it's about actually giving them a chance to do that without stressing them too much with all kinds of high inputs and biocides. The majority of the relationships between microbes and plants are actually positive in a regenerative approach, and that's Ecology 101. They become really negative when you're in a highly disturbed, stressed, simplified ecosystem. But when you build diversity and biological function, most of the beneficial relationships start to come out. A bit like humans, when you put them in under a lot of stress, they tend to revert to, like being pretty straightforward and having to just get things done. But when you give them a good environment and cooperation, all kinds of things happen. Plants need a bioactive root zone and water, not just nutrients from the soil. I know that sounds really basic, but a lot of the time water's the most limiting factor in the season. And if you've got compaction and poor roots and no carbon, well, water's your limiting factor. But there's also all this biochemistry in the soil, not just nutrients, not just NPK and calcium. There's a lot of biomolecules and other things that are really important for the system. Soils are living systems in a regenerative approach. That's taken really seriously, and it's prioritised to the same level as physics and chemistry. Nutrients cycle and get taken up in different ways, not just from soluble forms. And a lot of these ways are via soil microbes. So you've got to work with your soil microbes, basically, is a key thing. And soil fertility is not just about having nutrients in your soil. A soil test says I've got nutrients, but are they cycling effectively? Just because the test says that there's nutrients there, do I have a root zone that can actually take up those nutrients? So it's more than just having the nutrients. So these are some of the key differences in perspective and approaches. And there's just a couple more before I'll pull up on this, but increasing diversity is a key thing rather than simplifying everything, which is often a goal of of conventional agronomy is to actually get everything out of the paddock except the plant that we're trying to grow, which is not realistic in a landscape. And we try to treat the causes, not symptoms. That's really important, because if you treat symptoms, you'll be back opening that bottle very quickly. Whereas if we treat causes, we may be able to sort of reduce the need for inputs. It's also about long term. Like everyone, it's fair enough, cash flow is really important in a farm business, but we often focus on maximising short term yields. But that can be quite risky if I'm lifting my nitrogen rates and I've got a really uncertain season. There's a higher risk involved. We're about trying to get optimum production for the long term rather than maximising production for the short term. If I can, over the 10-year cycle, if I can get more even yields, even in the dry years, and obviously the dry years is where probably I'm going to get a lot of payback in terms of cash flow. But let me try and get optimum yield rather than maximum yield. And there's a difference between the two, which I don't have time to go into today. We look at below ground, like most of these agronomists that you're going to be talking, not most of them, all of them, they've got calluses on their hands from using a thing called a hand tool, also known as a spade. So they're not afraid, even though they worked in local government, they're not afraid to use hand tools. They get out there with a spade. So it's really important to look under the ground as well. And we're all about enhancing the good guys, not just whacking the bad guys. You can just whack the bad guys, but if you actually support the good guys, then they whack the bad guys and you can have a break. And the term that I'll use is complementarity, which means there's a lot of cooperation and synergy in ecosystems. It's not just predators eating prey and things attacking other things. There's actually a lot of evolution has created a lot of synergy in life. And so life as a whole community, can live in balance. So we focus on that side to it. So the technical name for that sometimes used is complementarity, which is a really not an easy word. But I think you all know where I mean. So that's a bit of a summary of regen ag versus agronomy versus conventional agronomy. I know that there's kind of a spectrum. There's, as I mentioned, there's conventional agronomists that are quite holistic, and then there's regenerative agronomists who maybe not so holistic. So, but as a general rule, these are the kind of approaches, if we have to label it, these are the kind of differences, if you like. And just to sort of sum it up for you, regenerative agronomy is not about disregarding the positives of conventional agronomy, like, for example, minimum no-till, stubble retention, controlled traffic, some of the using herbicides when you need to. Like, it's not about throwing out all of the tools that we have in the 21st century from modern science, but it is about redesigning it so that we can treat some of the causes, often which are soil-based, and that way we can minimise having to use some of these inputs, if you like, lower the horsepower requirements. And the other thing that I think regenerative agronomy does a bit better than conventional agronomy is that regenerative agronomists usually learn from the farmers and graziers they're working with, because farmers and graziers by nature usually are pretty innovative and always trying to adapt things to make it work in the paddock. And that's how I know I've learned in my career a lot from, most of what I've learned is from farmers and graziers sharing with me their innovative agronomy and regen practices. So, and what works in a complex system. So you do get innovation in conventional ag, don't get me wrong, but a lot of the time there's a system or a recipe that people follow, which is high input based. And so I would argue, to stand corrected, that there's probably less innovation on the ground. So that's a key thing of regen ag. It's about learning and adapting, sorting out a complex system. All right, so that's kind of an introduction to regenerative agronomy. I might go back to that slide. I thought I'd just introduce the four regen agronomists we've got, say good day to them briefly, and then we're going to get to Chris, and Chris is going to give us a bit of his summary of his context, which I think I've got here. Yeah, so before we jump to Chris, to your paddock, I might just go through the group. So Luke, do you just want to say good day to everyone? And tell us when you've made your first $1 million by being a regen agronomist.
Yeah, hi everybody. Still working on the first million, so definitely not in it for the money just at the minute, but we're working on that. But what would you like to know, Dave?
Oh, well, like how long you've been been in this space, working as a sort of practicing agronomist?
So I've been playing around in this space since I was I started a worm farm when I was 19, and I'm now 55. So I did notice some things there, but I suppose about 20 years I've been sort of 10 years part-time. Actually, no, let's rephrase that. Time goes by. I did it part-time for a while, and then probably 15 years ago or 12 years ago, I started doing it full-time. So,
yeah, great. And mainly working with broadacre cropping originally, and some grazing, but in the Riverina sort of northern bit, but now sort of spreading out into different climate zones and things.
Yeah, we're very lucky. We deal with people from the top of Queensland right across into Western Australia. So,
great, terrific. All right, thank you, Luke. And we'll come back and have a look at what program you developed for Chris in a minute. Thanks for that. Robin, do you want to say good day, where you are, and why you got into this positive field of regenerative agronomy?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Robin Tate. I'm based in the northwest coast of Tassie, and I work with clients all around Tassie and a little bit in Victoria as well. So for me, my background is actually pyrethrum agronomy and potatoes, seed potato production. And I started looking into that there had to be another way to agriculture when I was like, I wasn't allowed to do any nutrition to my pyrethrum plants, like nothing more than NP and K, which led me to nutritional farming course, and then having soil highlighted to me, which then led me on to getting very excited and wanting to change my direction in ag. So I did an Nuffield scholarship looking at how soil health principles can be integrated into intensive cropping rotations to reduce chemicals. And that just completely changed my outlook on agriculture and chemical farming, and I couldn't do that anymore. So I went and worked on a farm, and then 2022 I started consulting in this area and helping farmers who are looking to make the transition, understanding the soil ecosystem, the farm landscape, multi-species pastures, and one of the most important things, the paddock between our ears. So,
great. Thanks, Robin. Yeah, we don't want the monoculture up there, that's for sure.
No.
Thanks very much. The next cab off the rank, Nikala, do you want to say good day? Obviously, you're part of NutriSoil, but you've also been on a journey to becoming a regenerative agronomist as well.
Yeah, thanks, David. So my first degree was in business, so I was working in training and development in the government. Then I married my husband, who was a beef farmer, and then he turned a worm farmer. So then I started working for NutriSoil, which was the family business. Then I went on to do sustainable ag at university. And I guess you learn about agroecology and issues in ag and climate change in that course, but I really chose to do the soil science and the soil management. So that's sort of how I learned my agronomy skills.
Yeah. And I guess, Nikala, like you guys, NutriSoil obviously sells an input, a biological input to farmers to put out as part of their agronomy kind of program. And I guess that the key thing is that going down the regenerative approach, it's not just about products. It is actually about a different approach to agronomy, which is a bit of a weak link in Australia because there's a few biological/regenerative agronomists. They're very few. And then I guess not all of them have, complete training might be the way to put it as well. So there's not a lot of regenerative agronomists out there to support farmers and graziers that are making change. And that's one of the challenges, hence why having this webinar in many ways.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we have the hub care team, David. We know that NutriSoil is just one part of the system, and if they don't do all of the other parts, it's just not going to work. So
yeah, great. All right. No, thank you, Nikala. And Simon is the last of the regen agronomists for today, Simon Matson. Simon, I'm not sure, you might not have your camera on, but hopefully you can hear me. Do you want to just say good day to everyone and where you came from, how you ended up doing regen agronomy?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Apologies for no camera today. For some reason, I can't make it work. I'm actually not at home. My home for me is Mackay in North Queensland, but I'm actually not far from Robin today. So I'm down in Tasmania on holiday. And yeah, I think maybe I don't have enough service to be able to run the camera side of this, but at least I'm pretty sure you can hear me.
Yes. Oh, good. So
So, yeah,
you were a regenerative cane farmer, and you grew other mixed crops as well, maize and soybeans and things. So how did you sort of end up getting more into the agronomy side of it?
yeah, I guess I'm a little probably the ring in this group today in the fact that I don't have a university degree of any description. I actually never even finished high school. So I've been a farmer all my life. And yeah, very much conventional farmer, raised on a cattle station in Western Queensland. Then we bought the sugarcane farm in on the coast of Pye. And during over the years of running that conventionally, by the time we get through to sort of 2010, somewhere there to '07 through to 2010, I was really starting to question the conventional approach and looking for other answers. So that over time led me to a Nuffield scholarship, which I did, concentrating on biological function, and then that opened the door to me as to the value, particularly of plant diversity, which then enables biological diversity. So that gave me the impetus then to test the theory around plant diversity. Um, I did a whole lot of that over a number of years uh, through the mid 2010s sort of thing. And yeah, during that period, because I also hosted a number of on-farm events, I got to meet David Harvey. Um, and yeah, from there, I've actually moved a little bit into doing, well, I call it agronomy, but I don't know that I would call myself agronomist. I'm more just a very interested farmer who has partnered with someone like David who can mentor me whenever I need some technical advice, because I have a very practical background in the application of all these processes. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, I guess, Dave.
Yeah, thanks, Simon. Thanks very much for that. Yeah, and I guess having known Simon, everyone for quite a while, I mean, what I observed when I first met him is he was doing his own agronomy pretty much. So a lot of you farmers and graziers out there might be doing your own agronomy, or you might do some of your agronomy, but you still work with an agronomist, or you might like outsource most of your agronomy to a consulting agronomist or someone from a store. So there's different, obviously everyone has different approaches, but some farmers and graziers obviously do most of their agronomy themselves. And Simon, I'm going to put you in that category. I know you did talk, did have other support, but and this is the thing, if you're going regenerative, if you're used to doing your own agronomy or being an informed partner in your agronomy with your agronomist, then going regenerative is a different approach. So obviously you're going to have to learn some new skills. Your agronomist is going to have to learn some new skills. Not everyone wants to do agronomy for themselves. That's fair enough. So it is quite a bit of change involved. Thanks very much for that, Simon, and we'll come back to your program here. So I better scoot on, everyone. We've got the next stage of today is looking at a case study and then getting the guys to sell you as many products as they can. No, that's not the goal of regenerative agronomy, but sometimes it is the goal of agronomy. But yeah, we've got a case study for today just to sort of get things going on what is regenerative agronomy. The best way to see what it is to see it in action, see how people make decisions and come up with conclusions for that paddock ecosystem to make profitable crops and pastures that are healthy. So we've got Chris Stanmore has happily donated his paddock. I don't know if this advice is going to be free, Chris, or Nicola's going to try and hit you up with an invoice, but hopefully she's not. So, Chris, this is just a photo of one of your paddocks. Do you just want to give us like a bit of a brief summary about where you are and sort of, there's a few dot points there on the picture, but rainfall, where you are, what your enterprise is, and kind of how you started to make a shift to a more regenerative approach?
Hello, everybody. It's Chris Stanmore speaking. I live near Howlong, and we've only been here for 7 years or so, but so we're actually pastoralists from Western New South Wales. That's where we were born and raised, but we were chasing more rain. That's why we came here, or partly why we came here. But I'm not too sure that was successful, really, because the rain's been not as good as everybody said it was going to be. So that's led us to change some of our enterprise mix for one thing, but we're not actually croppers as such. I don't know anything about cropping, but I know a little bit about livestock. And the paddock that we're looking at, it was flooded in 2022, and the area we're particularly looking at had the flood on it for the longest period of time. So that was the bit that we were particularly worried about, and that came. The flood was there for a long time, and so it was late in the season when it basically went. Too late to do anything, and all it grew was rubbish. But it was a paddock full of weeds, like some pioneer species mainly, and we were wondering, didn't think it'd ever come good again. But then we used the soil key machine and put a down under covers mix, winter mix in there, and that didn't go in until early 24, March 24. And then, and of course, it still hasn't been what they say is normal rain for here in that time. So, what's enlightening to us is the fact that even though we've had little rain, some of the species in that mix are still starting to come through now with next to no rain. The other thing that's not mentioned there is that we well and truly have been exposed to basically through the grazing for profits, I suppose, schools. So high intensity, short duration grazing. So our most powerful tool, we don't have many tools on our farm as far as farming goes, but our livestock is our main tool.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and obviously plants and animals interact with each other, and how you manage the animals influences what happens to the plants and how they persist or not, and how they grow. So that's obviously a big tool if you're in mixed farming or grazing. Chris, the other thing you mentioned there was weeds, which in the regen world, some people get very heated when they hear the word weed. They say there's no such thing as a weed. But the other term you used there was a pioneer species. So obviously those ones that establish early after bare ground or after a major disturbance event. I guess, Chris, a quick question I have for you before we let the team loose on your paddock, and you'll get 4 different versions of what you should do, is how have you found the difference from, like, I'm assuming Western New South Wales, you're talking out in the Western Division, like either south or north of Broken Hill sort of thing, somewhere out there in pastoral country. What do you see as some of the key differences in terms of how the landscape sort?
As far as the transition goes, it was put to me once, and I think it's pretty true. You've got to make your money before you come here.
Right. Okay. Yep.
So stay out west as long as you can.
Most people that are not from out that country would say the opposite, right? But yeah, great. No, it's a great point. I remember there's a cropper near south of Forbes, the Nicholson family, that moved sort of from further west, closer to Forbes, and I remember the father there said to me, Dave, I just keep thinking that I'm farming out west of England, west of Cobar, and then it's all right. If I keep that in my brain, then I don't take too many risks. But yeah, having that different climate is like, influences the decisions you make. Chris, thank you very much for that summary. And that gives everyone else a bit of a feel for your situation. Obviously, the specific paddock situation is obviously a really dry spell. and a flood event prior to that, which really knocked the paddock around. But then you've tried a couple of tactics since then. Soil Key Renovator, some people, I'm sure a lot of people will be familiar with what it is. It's a rotary hoe doing yoga basically. So it's a kind of strategic tillage implement that doesn't disturb too much, but it looks like it disturbs more than it actually does because it throws that soil out of the furrow. But so you use that to sow in a multi-species mix. Great. All right. Well, Chris, we might hand over to the first of our regen agronomists to sort of go through how they've approached your problem. And I'll just let everyone know before we jump in that I'll just share this. Hopefully everyone can see that. So the guys did do a soil test. So through a particular lab. Now there's lots of different labs in Australia that are all accredited, but looks like Luke's requested this one for the paddock for Chris, and they've just gone with EAL. And had what looks to be a comprehensive soil test. So we can get the guys to talk through that a bit more later on. But just to let everyone know, there has been a soil test on the paddock. So we might throw straight into the first cab off the rank, which is Luke. So Luke, everyone's heard the situation there and the challenge Chris and Jane have with that paddock. What's your recommendation for them and sort of what is your thought about how you tackle this situation?
Yeah, so Dave, I've actually put two recommendations together. I've put sort of together a commercial one that you can go and buy off the shelf, and then I've done another one which we'll talk about in a minute, which is you can go and make your own stuff. So I'm not
two different programs. One's based on off-the-shelf products. One's based on do-it-yourself, mainly biological type products.
Yeah.
Before we jump into both of them, though, which have got products, which is same as conventional agronomy, there might be different types of products. But when you're tackling a client in a situation like Chris has put to us, there's a paddock and someone needs help trying to grow the pastures. What's the top two or three things you usually go, right, well, this is the first two or three things I'm going to have to do to sort of understand or get my head around the problem?
Yeah, so I've been lucky enough. I've been to Chris's place, so that's the first step. Is actually go out
and have a look.
Yeah, put your feet in the paddock wherever you can. And I'm not going to try and tell Chris how to graze. He's already got that under control. And I'm not going to I just want to find out where they're at, their knowledge, and their goals, and where they want to go. And that's probably my first step. Second thing is I'd like to get a comprehensive soil test done. So we do not just a basic test like that. We'll bring that test up in a minute so we can talk about that. And then I want to dig in the dirt. I want to dig into the soil and see what's there and look at what's growing and things like that. So I was at Chris's place before the flood in 22, and he had some good chicory, I think, from memory, or plantain, and his pastures weren't too bad. It was a pretty dry time then as well, I think, Chris. So yeah, you brought the dry weather from the middle of New South Wales to the Victorian border. So good job with that.
You're not blaming him for coming into the high rainfall. He said there's less rain where everyone promised more than what he's getting. So someone's not right. All right. So you've gone out and got a bit of context, not just like the grower's enterprise context, but also the actual paddock, because the soil test doesn't tell you the full story, obviously. It just tells you biochemistry. It doesn't tell you the structure and the ground cover and what types of plants are growing there. So you've got a bit of context, and what would be the next thing?
Yeah, so I think we spoke about the multi-species and all those sorts of things, and I think Robin and Simon probably cover those a bit better than I will. But that first, if we could put up that soil test, Dave, I think this is very important. Like, we're not just testing for N, P, and K and a few other things. So if we look at this soil test and we look at sort of everything that's available, like your phosphorus and potassium and all those sorts of things, they're not that high. The cool peas probably not too bad. I think we're looking at the first aisle, the first one there in the top pasture. So if you go down there, most of the this is all the soluble stuff that's plant available and the normal stuff that you'll get, which is reasonably low in most things. But if we go down to the bottom of the to the totals.
Yeah.
So this is what I'm trying to look at as well, is these totals. So when I look at the total phosphorus, it's 611 parts. Well, that's more than enough to grow pastures for quite some time. There's 2,651 parts of potassium, so there's plenty. And in the zinc, where's the zinc? I know the zinc
75, yeah,
75.
in the middle there. So I guess just to slow down a bit, because we've got people probably a bit new, some of them a bit new to regenerative agronomy. This key distinction that you get when you sort of get more holistic with the soil or take a more regenerative approach is we don't just measure the available nutrients. We might want to see what the total reserve is of potential fertility, because obviously some of that potential fertility is cycling, naturally cycles into the available bucket. So you're not just getting a normal agronomic test would just measure the available nutrients, but you're also wanting to see what the potential fertility is, and your observations are it's actually reasonably fertile, this soil. If we can get it cycling its nutrients effectively, we may not need too much fertilizer.
That's correct. So if we can utilise whatever's there, and I think that's a big part of regenerative farming, is let's use what we've got available instead of just importing stuff all the time. So if we can make all of these available, that's much better. And how we do that is several ways. So I suppose. Yeah. Do you want me to go?
Well, we'll just quickly have a look at your program. So I guess what you're focusing on is not just the fertility, but can I get the nutrients to cycle effectively and be taken up effectively? So,
correct.
I guess from a regenerative approach, we know that means I have to have good root systems, I have to have good soil structure, and I have to have biological function.
Yeah. So the key, I think, to improving soil health is to grow the healthiest plant you can grow. So it photosynthesizes at its maximum rate, exudates at its maximum rate, feeds biology at its maximum rate. And if we've got to throw some money at that, I think we have to do it. So in my recommendation, because we've got all those things in the totals, I haven't put any solid fertilizer in here. So I've done all foliars because the plant can take them up very efficiently. So I've got some biologicals in there that all do different things, and some nutrition, and some nutrition. So I've gone for 5 to 10 litres a hectare of NutriSoil, because it's got a very diverse microbial amount, like probably one of the most diverse micro products in the world. It's got nutrition that's available to the plant, and it's also got humic and fulvic acids, which helps drive into the plant any nutrition that I add with that stuff. And the other thing I've done is I've got specific biology that is I'm adding that with a P release, and that's specifically there to release phosphorus and calcium and potassium, and they're the specific bugs for that, and the NutriSoil, and that will enhance that. And then I've got a biostimulant, the TM Agriculture. So that will make the P release and NutriSoil work better, and it'll also stimulate the IMOs, so the indigenous microorganisms that already live there. So these other two will do that, but TM Ag will do that as well. And then we've paired that with best foliar or an equivalent product. So it's just an NPK trace element foliar application, which is chelated, and I find the NutriSoil will chelate it and drive it in even better. And there was a bit of a calcium sulfur issue from memory. So for ease of use, we use a product called SuperCal, which is 100% available calcium and sulfur, and easily taken up by the plant. And we'll get that plant. So it's all about getting that plant as healthy as we can. So so that will feed the biology that we add and feed the biology that's in the soil. So that's the commercial one, I suppose.
Yeah, great. Yeah, well, if I just pull out, I'm just mindful of time, and I'm just going to summarise this a little bit. But basically, in conventional agronomy, we're going to focus on the nutrients if we feel they're limiting. So if there's a limiting nutrient, we're going to put some out, like starter phosphorus is obviously a common one, or nitrogen. And trace elements or micronutrients is not as focused. It's becoming more of a focus in conventional ag. And so obviously you've got that focus in there as well. But I guess the two key things that are quite distinct to a mainstream program would be you've included biostimulants, which they may not, a lot of conventional agronomy would say are not as consistent, or we don't know about them, but they're very widespread in regenerative ag, having a biostimulant to help stimulate plant physiology. So you've got two of them in there, including NutriSoil. And then you've also got a specific inoculant. So obviously most people are familiar with rhizobia, which we put out with our legumes to fix nitrogen, and it's just a bacteria that fixes nitrogen. But the P-release product, which is obviously specialized phosphorus bacteria, and is it a fungal inoculant too, or just a bacterial product, that one?
No, it's 3 fungi and a bacteria.
Okay. So it's a mixed inoculant.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those particular fungi and bacteria are actually specialized in accessing phosphorus from the tied up or the mineral fraction in the soil. So again, we're trying to drive the release and cycling of phosphorus biologically by actually adding an inoculant. So hopefully everyone can kind of see when you're doing regenerative agronomy, it's not just about putting out soluble P. It's going, hang on, we might already have P in reserves here. Can we improve the cycling of that P? And that might be getting the roots to grow better, but it also, and plant diversity, but it also might be using a specific product. And there's more and more of these products coming on the market out now there. So Luke, we'll flip over to your second program, because this is a program that Chris could get just by going through yourself or someone to buy the products and put it in the program. Yep. But the second program, just briefly, because I'm just mindful of time with the 3 other guys following, is to make some biological type products yourself and then use them.
Yeah. So I've put at the top here the NutriSoil and the P-release together as a biological stimulant or biological additive, but you can also make your own, which is liquid IMO, which is indigenous microorganisms, and that's a bit of a process to ask how to go and do that. But so that's a whole webinar in its own, so we'll stay away from how to do that in this one. But those 2 products there will give you a very diverse biological hit. So the first other one is FAA. So I've got one called RAA. So that's fish amino acids is what that stands for, and it's a nitrogen replacement, and it's a very simple make that yourself. Do you want to pull those up, or we won't worry?
I'll pull them up and maybe just give a really brief summary of them. I'll pull them up. So you've got RAA, which is rue amino acid. That's so you get go to this and harvest the food.
So there's the science behind it. So other people will understand that a lot more than I will. But when I sent this to the lab, they were very excited about how that came out as a product, and they on-sent it and found out what peptides and all sorts of things were in it. So it's just looking more deeply into what's there. So that's
and I think if I can just jump in, this is one of the key differences of regenerative agronomy, is that we know that the form of nitrogen that plants get given influences their physiology. So if you just give them soluble urea and stuff, that has an influence on them in different ways. And if you give them amino acids, nitrogen in a different amino acids, that can actually influence the physiology of their plant, not just from a growth point of view, but from a induced resistance to disease, all these kind of really important biostimulatory benefits that aminos can give. So that's quite a big difference in how you're doing your nutrient agronomy. And I guess everyone, that's why Luke's focusing in on the amino acid side to it.
And also the plant doesn't need to use as much energy to convert it into proteins. So then the next one we've got is what they call an FPJ, so a fermented plant juice. So if I've got a soil test, and different plants have different amounts of things in them. So you can see this one here has got 5,868 parts per million of potassium. So if I've got a potassium low soil, I can use a plant that has that, and I can mix it with other plants. But so this is a stinging nettle, and it's what they call a dry extract. So we put sugar on it, and it uses dry osmosis to draw all the liquid parts of the sugar out, and it helps. It sort of mimics exudates, I suppose, and also it's a plant food. So it's a bit of both. So you might want to look at that a bit more.
Yeah, Luke, I might just go back to your main slide because I'm mindful of time, and I'm going to have to pull it up a bit just to hang on a minute. But just there's a question there from David Lund. David, the lab that Luke found, which I'm also pretty excited about, is at Macquarie University. So hopefully, David Lund, you can see that. It's APAF, but we'll send the details out afterwards, Shelley and Nicola, if you guys got that. So I'll come back to that round. But Luke, I'm just because of time, and I know we're going to run out if I'm not careful. So
we just put one more up, the fermented, the seawater one. Just put the seawater one up.
Oh,
so
sorry.
So we always are looking at our.
Hang on. It's on a different. This one. Yep.
Yeah. So we're always just looking at like 16 different things most of the time. So a fermented seawater's got all of these elements in it. And us as an intelligent human being really don't know what most of them do in the world of plants. We know a little bit, but all of those things also have a part to play, and you can just put out so little to make a big difference. So that's that one.
Great. No, so it's that approach of being more holistic and understanding that it's very small amounts of biostimulants and these micronutrients can have a pretty profound effect on the physiology. And then your final one there, just to summarize it up, is you've got, if you wanted to just use a solid fertilizer, you could use an alternative phosphorus type product, chickpeas like that, or rock phosphate, and then you could add your inoculant and your biostimulant to that product to get it out in the root zone.
So I'd just like to keep things as simple as I can, but we need to look at everything pretty deeply. But if we can keep things simple so it actually gets done.
Yeah, great. No, thank you, Luke. And I think it's a great program, and it's really highlights some of these key differences that regenerative ag takes to conventional ag, because it's bringing in these other kind of factors that you want to try and manage. So thank you for that. There's a couple of questions will be floating in. So I better scoot on to our next cab off the rank, which is Robin. So Robin, you've had a look at the context. You haven't had the luxury of going to the place like Luke has, but you've had a look at a few things. So what's your approach here, and what's your general first couple of things you always do when you're tackling a new job or a new client or a new paddock?
Okay. So for me, it's very much is all about asking questions, building up a picture of what's actually happening on the farm.
They want answers. They don't want questions. They want you to give them answers.
I know, and that's moving into Regen Agronomy. It's actually about empowering the farmer with knowledge so they can make the decision rather than outsourcing decisions. So it's a helping that transition of understanding that as well in our work. All about building a picture of the farm, what's actually going on, what are the perceived issues that the farmer has, what's the goal they're trying to achieve. Also just where the farmer's knowledge is at, what their fears might be, what's actually going on that might be stopping them taking steps forward on their land. And establishing everyone's thoughts on synthetic inputs, not just the husband, it will be the wife, and then everyone that's involved on the farm, because there can be very different views there, which can be antagonistic between each other. So need to consider that. So basically I'm establishing where the farmer is at, and then tailoring where then my advice comes from or my words come from. So whether it needs to be sort of quite conventional talking just to build the farmer's confidence, or is it more at that biological space, or it might even go fully to the energetic side, which I work as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically, go from the known to the unknown, which is an old principle I like. So you go to where someone's at with language they're familiar with, and then you can move from there to help them on a learning journey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I like to really work. Sorry.
Biodynamic workshops, and when I was a young fellow on a biodynamic farm, the biodynamic people giving the talk, like they used all this language, no one else knew what the hell was going on. So everyone just sort of sat there looking at them, but they knew where they were, but they weren't kind of coming to where we were and going, taking us on a journey.
Yeah. And that's very much what I like to do, is take the people on a journey, work alongside them as a mentor, just hold their hand in the journey.
Yep.
Really like to get out, look at the farm, listen and observe, and also listen and observe how the farmer's responding to everything, what their thoughts are of indicator plants, and whether I need to bring in some knowledge there so there's not so much hatred about certain plants. Also asking, how do the cattle like the plant? Like the paddock.
You're talking about weeds. Are you actually talking about weeds there? Is that what you mean? Hatred of certain plants. Right. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then also just to get a gauge of how if the farmer likes the paddock, or there's a history there of not liking it. Do the cattle like it? All sorts of things. And obviously we need to ground truth and dig holes and have a look what's going on in our underground world. And because we've got a soil test here, it's very important to go and have a look what our numbers are actually telling us. For me, it's more about outside in the paddock, but important to just have numbers as a benchmark for where we need to go. And then I like to discuss what products might be in the shed, what products would be available in the area, and maybe broaden horizons to other things. And then bring all sorts of different options to the table and work out what actually might be achievable for the farmer. So I found this task really quite tricky, because I worked out that I actually work a lot with the farmer, use their knowledge, use where they're at to actually formulate what plan we're going to do for the paddock. So
I guess what you're sort of saying is that there's more than one way to skin the cat, probably. Sorry, any cat lovers, but the other thing is that behind those different options, there's going to be some sort of core principles that that have to be met. Like, I need soil structure, we need diversity. There'll be some core principles, but there's more than one way to get that result. There's different tactics that I can use and inputs I can use.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll
you've
also
got to make that fit for the client. So
bring in some education, or just highlight some things that are happening in the ecosystem, just to help them bring them along.
Great. So then the plan. So I think the next slide is here's a specific option, like an option for you for these guys for that paddock.
So basically from what I've been given, the issues we need to address is re-establish the biology in the flooded area. Our soil test, the pH is at around the 5.6, so we would like to increase that, and the available calcium was quite low. We all know that calcium is really important for plant growth. And then assessing the plant density in that pasture and whether we need to do anything to increase the production. So my number one thing I thought was 2 tonne per hectare of lime.
So that's obviously after looking at the soil tests.
Sorry.
That's all good. Just checking. Because sometimes people, when they hear about regenerative agronomy, they might think it's all full of cowboys, but you're doing the due diligence. So
so we're wanting to get our pH around the 6.5, and our pH is 5.6, and I thought the calcium was low, so let's go in with a product that gives us some calcium.
And I guess, sorry to jump in, Roland, but again, that highlights this thing. Some people really focus on calcium and the exchangeable calcium proportion. Other people worry about pH, but they're actually two sides of the same coin, because acidity is high hydrogen in the cations, and so it often complements or it co-presents with low calcium. So they're kind of two sides of the same coin, but sometimes people just focus on one or the other, but you're kind of tackling both in a holistic way.
Yeah. Yep. And then I thought if it was an option to actually mix this lime with some organic matter, some aged or compost chicken litter to help with our P and our K. And then also you've got micronutrients and organic matter in that, because I think that's going to be important to build the health of the soil up in that area. Using some worm castings to bring biology and stimulation into there. Apply this anytime now, preferably ahead of rain if you're using the compost. There might be spent mark around, great mark, lots of different organic matters if it's close by. And then for me, I don't really worry about on the soil test all the micronutrients. I would rather address that through sap testing. So once we've got pasture growing sap test here in Agvita in Devonport, and so I'd have a look at what came back and would put some NutriSoil on there, some fish hydrolysate, and then a micronutrient mix. Maybe we've made our own biofertilizer, or Ectol's got a Micromax, which is pretty cool with iodine and selenium and a whole silica, all sorts of things in there. And then look at any micronutrients that are deficient that actually are essential for photosynthesis, because we want to get as much photosynthesis happening as we can to put sugar into the ecosystem.
Great. There's a lot of parallels with Luke's obviously thing. There's a couple of things you've added in there, and one being the using sap testing for nutrient and micronutrient management, which I think obviously, as you know, is a really big area of regenerative ag. It's also used by conventional agronomists to some extent, but I think in regenerative agronomy we focus on it a lot more. But this idea of getting the plant to grow as best it can is photosynthesizing, and that's maximizing the energy that we're bringing in from the sun and turning into living energy in the soil. So we're driving that. So we're trying to really get that plant to optimize its photosynthesis. Just a quick one, Robin. Do you use a Brix meter to see how the plant's photosynthesizing? Is that a tool that you have in your toolbox?
Definitely get the Brix meter out. And now I've got a good garlic crusher. You need a good garlic crusher. I'm using it a lot more, which is just really a really quick measure that we can do right there and then in the paddock to see if the plant is photosynthesizing, creating sugars. So
great. No, thanks for that.
Terrific.
Thank you, Robin.
I think
Chris,
sorry,
Robin.
One more slide.
Sorry. I thought there was two. Great. Terrific. So this is dealing with the plant side of things.
Now, I'm not sure that this actually needs to happen. Chris, I need to ask you some questions. Whether you don't have to answer it, but just what's the production of that paddock? Have you got enough plants there? If there wasn't, I would look at actually oversowing with a perennial mix with some more cocksfoot, phalaris, subclovers, lucerne, chicory, plantain, sheep's burnet. Or if there was a requirement for a supercharged pasture to fatten some weaners or something on it, we could look at putting oats, vetch, and brassica, particularly the oats, to help increase the biology or get the soil actually functioning in that area. Or we could use down to undercovers starter mix, spiced up with some of the things, Chris, you've already added in. And this will give you some late winter feed. So obviously seed coated with NutriSoil, we all know that gives the seed a boost. Plus or minus fertilizer, depending on the farmer's thoughts. My preference would probably be no fertilizer, but I know some people like to have that crop jump out of their ground nice and quickly. And then I'd look at foliar feeding down the track, and very careful management of the grazing during establishment of your perennial paddocks. So
So the long-term goal assuming again only Luke's been and had a good long chat with Chris, but if the long-term goal is a perennial based pasture that's fairly low maintenance, like you don't have to spray weeds in it all the time, then grazing management and building the diversity of that pasture is the sort of through next 3 to 5 years. And once you've got it there, then it's gonna pay you back in spades, which I'm sure, Chris, coming from the Western Division, about sort of long-term perennial pastures and shrubs having to sort of support the system long-term. But it's really how you get there.
Can I answer one question there?
Yeah.
Yeah, go for it, Chris.
With regard to what species to put in there, the winter super mix that I put on had pretty much everything you just mentioned, plus some 5 other perennials that I put in there. When I spoke to Grant Sims about it, he would have rather me done just the super mix the first year and put the perennials in it the second year. But I said there's only going to be 1 year. So that's why I did it all at once. Maybe I'd have been better off to do it, over 2 years, two seedings.
Yeah. Yes and no. I've been making mixes up like you. They don't want to. So we have actually been putting our perennials in with our annuals, and you'll see your perennials coming up later down the track or at the same time with your annual crop. So I don't think you've done it. Well, no, it's not wrong. It's perfectly fine to do it the way that you've done it.
Okay, one of the photos that Shelley took the other day showed in that we've had no rain for, since this year anyway, to speak of. And in the trenches where the soil key was, one of the species that's come through now that didn't come through last year is plantain. And also someone locally told me when I came here, whatever you sow, always put a bit of lucerne in it, because 1 mouthful of lucerne is as good as 2 mouthfuls of anything else. So that's what I've done. And in that photo that Shelley took, there was some lucerne that was sort of 150 centimetres or whatever they are, 6 inches high in that paddock. And I had a look before we started here today, and that paddock was grazed for 44 days over 3 grazings last year, and there was 100 head of stock in 16 hectares of paddock. So it was a fairly big stocking rate for that short amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess it highlights, Chris, the deep-rooted, tap-rooted plants can keep going when everything else goes brown. Once they've got their roots down, they support, and you see it in Northeast Vic with chicory. We see it all around the place with chicory persisting when everything else has gone brown.
Yeah,
Sorry, Robin, I might pull it up, Chris and Robin, just because I'm mindful we're going to run out of time if I don't. But we'll have time for more discussion either at the end or in the follow-up session for sure, because we'd like to keep this going. So I'll keep going to the next one if that's okay. So the next cab off the rank is Nacala. So Nacala, you've heard Luke and Robin's approach. I guess there'll be some common ground to the way Robin and Luke have approached it. So are there any other things you'd like to add in or to highlight in your process for doing agronomy?
Yeah, absolutely. Very similar, which is a good thing, I guess. I guess the limiting factors I was looking at in the soil test were phosphorus, pH, molybdenum, potassium, zinc, and boron. So they're the ones I'd be looking at. And probably compaction from the flood. So some tools that I use is some department websites, which I'll send out. So there is I'll just get this up here, you're not going to see it. There's a fertiliser calculation sheet on the New South Wales government website, which is super easy. And on the Victoria website, I use that for benchmarks because it's sort of our area. I know there's benchmarks on the soil test as well. But looking at phosphorus as the first one, if you look at the soil test, could you get the soil test up and kind of look at the phosphorus area, David? Is that up? Yep, okay. So it can be confusing because there's all different types of tests. But the phosphorus, you've got like a Bray 1, you've got a Bray 2, you've got Colwell, and then you've got soluble phosphorus. So the Bray 1, the Bray 2, they're the plant available phosphorus. So you can see they're lower than the Colwell. The Colwell's got a bit more of the labile carbon phosphorus in it. So it's just got a higher amount. It's sort of sitting there, but it's not part of the totals. The totals is much higher. And I agree there's good totals amounts in all of the tests. But the concern is that the soluble phosphorus is quite low. So, you know, looking at the Colwell, and I think the Vic site uses Olsen, which is kind of half of the Colwell, the P is in good range. So I wouldn't be actually adding phosphorus straight away.
Look, like just to slow it down a sec, like obviously we've got a result for Colwell P, which is an estimate of available P, and then the lab, whether it's this lab or any other lab, gives you a benchmark over here. But the challenge for an agronomist is to, one, sort of say, well, using that method, the Colwell, is this benchmark, you know, relevant for me in my context, my enterprise, my rainfall type, my yield goals, you know, and that's sometimes a difference with the regenerative approach is you might use you take a different approach to the benchmark numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And you might create your own benchmarks as you sort of learn your paddocks as you go along. And I should have said at the start, like this is the soil test. Yes, we've had a visual soil assessment as well, but you know, what's actually getting into the plants. So it would be so good to have some SAP tests regularly over the growing season, and you would test the grasses and the legumes separately because they'll have different nutrient mixes in them, and then you would notice if any nutrients are constantly low. So if they're low in your soil test, low in the SAP test, and you don't have good growth, and that's when you would start to address the phosphorus. But we know, you know, phosphorus is, you know, you put on phosphorus and it's not always available. It's one of those ones that lock up. So you might only get 10 to 20% of it used, and the rest goes into your soil, maybe for later use, maybe it locks up again, and it does, or it can get washed into waterways. It's expensive. We saw what happened in 2008 when pea prices increased by 600%. And look, we've got Trump in government now, so we don't know what could happen. But some options are, if you were going to be addressing the phosphorus, and I'm not saying I'd do that straight away because I'd want to see some SAP tests, is putting out 50 to 80 kilograms of soft rock phosphate per hectare, but adding it with some organic matter, like 300 kilograms of worm castings. You've done a grazing management course, Chris, so high density grazing is great. Like you can nearly have 4% phosphorus in manure, and returning residues back with grazing management, that will return phosphorus back to your soil. But microbes are essential to that. So your plants can't take that even that organic phosphorus straight away. It has to be broken down by microbes and then delivered back to the plant. So it's really essential in your phosphorus cycling to have microbes in there. So David, do you have a snippet there of the worm castings? Yep.
Yeah, I've just put that up. So these are obviously some of the indicator species in worm castings or microbial species that are there, and some of the jobs that research shows they do, basically in terms of soil function.
Yeah. So this is from a DNA test, and sorry about my squiggly highlighting there, but you can just see these are some of the fungi. So 220 species of fungi in the worm castings. they produce enzymes that mainly degrade organic matter, and then the microbes can then transport that back to the plant. Look, you can see degrading organic matter, decomposing organic matter as you go down to the different types of fungi. Most of them I won't try to say, they've got some pretty funny names. But you can see some P solubilizing fungi there. And then you get these fungi that are antagonistic to disease, fungal diseases.
So again, just mindful of time and stuff, but the principle behind why you're focusing in on the castings and the biological side to it is to try and increase that diversity, functional diversity in the soil plant system, because a lot of these microbes, whether they be fungi, bacteria, etc., they play roles that help us cycle nutrients. They play roles that trigger plant disease resistance. They play roles that help build soil structure. They play roles that build soil humus and therefore hold more soil water. Like they do a lot of good stuff. They don't all just eat plants and kill your crop, basically. So I guess having something like castings or compost or organic matter or biologicals in the program, this core principle of regenerative agronomy is building the beneficials up. I'm just mindful of time, Nicola, so I'm going to I'm just going to keep scooting because I probably covered that off that slide.
Yeah, you've got it all in one there. That's great.
Yeah.
And then look, just the impact of fertilizers on the biology. We've done some testing with microbe labs, and look, these are pot tests, but they're replica tests. So I know that the soil is more forgiving, but things like MAP, DAP, urea and superphosphate, they can harm the microbes, where your biologicals will increase and diversify your microbes.
Yeah, and I guess this is one of the big concerns when you do regenerative agronomy. You know it's an agricultural paddock. We know we have to add stuff, we have to grow stuff, we have to disturb it to grow our crops. But we really are also aware that if we don't rehab the soil community, then we're not going to get that functional change to a more low management, sort of high functioning paddock ecosystem. And we know that a lot of inputs take us one step back. So it's just, where's the sweet spot? I still need to use some starter fertilizer, but how can I minimize the adverse effect of it? Can I maximize the beneficial effect that it's going to have? If it's going to grow me bigger roots and plants, as Luke and Robin have said, then that's going to drive more photosynthesis that will actually take it in a positive way. So there's ways that's, I guess, a big challenge we have. And NutriSoil as a product, a biological type product, is there to try and provide that buffering or positive environment and rebuild it.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most of our customers would still be using some synthetics, and if you can't get your P up in your SAP test with the soft rock phosphate and the worm castings, then your last resort is using single super in a pasture. That's absolutely what a lot of people do, especially if you're in a cold environment. So absolute full context. To what you use and when you use it.
All right, I'll pull up now that people can see that final recommendation and we'll send it out. But we've only officially got, I think, 5 minutes, is it? I think I've got till 1:30, so, or 7 minutes. Yeah, which is not long for Simon, so I want to give him a bit of time. So, Carla, we can see the common elements and a couple of extra things that you've thrown in there, particularly around measuring soil biology, which is this other area of agronomy that we can bring in. So thank you very much for that. So Simon, I've had to reduce your time allocation, mate. Sorry about that. But you've had a look at the case study. You've heard the other three agronomists. So now's the time to add the high value products that we can sell to Chris, mate, because there's missing a few things that haven't sold him.
Yeah, right, Dave. No worries. First thing I'll say is that, yes, like Robin, I do feel that I'm behind the 8 ball here because I haven't had the privilege of standing in the paddock with Chris. So yes, for me, when I'm trying to help a farmer, I need their context and a good understanding of their management practices. So for me, that's a bigger part of the story than what I see on a soil test. So my approach has been more based on that soil test because that's really the only information I had apart from those
Yeah.
few photos that Sally took. So, so yes, I've chosen a more conventional approach because I don't have that context and or management background.
Yeah.
So, yeah, because of pH and possible calcium issues, I've recommended that we would apply a tonne to the hectare of lime and half a tonne of gypsum. Now, I'm combining both of them because I'm trying to adjust pH and I'm trying to adjust how much soil strength there is. So I'm referring to compaction here,
Yeah.
which is in this soil partially due to elevated levels of magnesium. So that magnesium at 22%, I think it was, will be contributing to
Yeah.
that
Simon,
soil
can I
being
just,
tough.
I'm going to interrupt you. Can you just lean closer to the microphone? Because it's actually quite hard to hear you now. I know you're on that
Okay.
laptop. But
Yeah,
you
sorry.
you need to lean right into the laptop.
Yeah, is that better?
Yeah, it is a bit better, yeah. So it's a high magnesium soil type, naturally, the clay, and our risk is, especially if it's had flooding and potentially before Chris and Jane came, overgrazing and some difficult years to help get that mitigate that magnesium influence on structure in particular, to get that calcium in there for that as well as the pH and the relatively low calcium.
Yes,
Yeah,
precisely. Thanks, Dave. And because of that flooding
yeah,
and probably historical cultivation, I think there's a need to break up a compaction layer that's sort of evident in the photos that were supplied.
yeah,
So that's why I've gone to the next step of actually recommending some deep ripping.
yeah,
And not having any context, I've got no idea if this is possible for you, Chris,
yeah,
but
yeah,
I I sort of think that a one-off deep ripping may well be necessary. Having
yeah,
said that, I wouldn't deep rip without then following it with planting species that were capable of
yeah,
keeping those ripper lines open for as long as possible. So I'm referring to tap-rooted plants.
yeah.
So for me, then the third step is that plant diversity, and that's critical is to get that plant diversity in there and get it well established.
Yeah. So
So
something like a yeoman's ripper or a Wallace
mhm,
plow, that kind of thing.
yep, the Yeomans do a good job. It's the
Yeah.
kind of deep ripper that when you see it pass through the soil, you the soil basically rises up and falls back into place, and there's
Yeah.
not much in the way of surface
Yeah.
disturbance. You're
Yeah.
trying to get that disturbance at depth to break
Yeah.
that plough pan or whatever that underlying hard place is, sort of thing. So yeah, biology is just like you and I. That biology that lives in our soils in conjunction with our plants has to be able to breathe, and it has to have access to moisture and a good place to live. And if it can't breathe, it won't be there. So compaction, I feel, in this paddock is a serious issue.
Yeah.
So yes, that's why I've
Yeah.
gone down the deep ripping road.
Yeah.
Um,
Obviously, if you had your chance and you'd gone out, you would have been able to verify that for yourself, at a field visit.
Precisely.
Yeah. And then the third one is obviously plant diversity, because I know you're a vegan agronomist.
Hmm.
And that's obviously pretty similar to what the other guys have put forward previously.
Yes, in the actual recommendation I've listed plant species and recommended rates to go with those species. I don't know if you
Yeah.
can get that up, Dave, and go down to the
I
bottom while we
don't,
do that bit.
yeah, I can't get it up, but we'll definitely send it
Okay.
out to Chris and everyone. I haven't been able to open that one,
Oh, righto.
but I'll
No
send
worries.
that out. Yeah.
So,
So Chris, Simon's actually put together a specific kind of plant mix for you, that he'll send out with some rates as well. So you can have a look at that and compare that to what you've done, and and what the other guys have said as well.
Thanks very
This
much.
is another reason why I really like an in-field visit and
Yeah,
talk to the farmer as well,
yeah,
because I don't necessarily believe in these shotgun mixes.
yeah,
Quite often, there's a lot of seed in a lot of these mixes. It can be very expensive, but has no chance of actually working in the particular field at that particular time of the year.
yeah,
So there can be a lot of wastage in money spent on seed
yeah,
that has no chance of working.
yeah,
So the other thing I wish to state is I can't say I'm a fan of the soil key. It is like any other planting tool, in the fact that there are instances where it is appropriate, but that's not everywhere. And perhaps it's not appropriate in this context either. So
yeah,
selection of the individual plant species and then the method of planting those species is as
yeah,
critical as selecting the actual species themselves.
yeah.
So
And
it's
that's,
very
yeah,
easy to, for instance, take a very small seed and bury it too deeply. So it
yeah.
has no chance of coming up in the first place. And yeah,
I
that's
guess
something that
that's agronomy 101, making sure you've got good seed soil contact,
mm,
whichever way you do
mm,
on agronomy.
yes.
Yeah,
You got to have good seed soil contact, but you've also got to have that seed, in the case of a small seed, close enough to the surface that it can
yeah,
actually come up.
yes, yeah, yeah. No, thanks
So
for that,
yeah,
Simon. Yeah,
in my recommendation, I've actually suggested sowing that paddock twice.
right.
Once with a
Yeah,
broadcast of smaller seeds, the smaller
yeah,
class of seeds on broadcast with a just with a spreader, and then a light harrowing and roller.
yeah,
Um, so yeah, prior to that, it probably needs a bit of light cultivation, to give a slightly loose surface, something that would loosen up the surface without burying, necessarily getting rid of all the plant material biomass that's there. I don't want all
yeah,
that to leave. I just want to make a bit of loose soil,
yeah,
so that the smaller seeds, there's four different smaller plant species.
yeah,
Throw those smaller seeds on the surface, harrow lightly and roll, and that could actually be done dry.
yeah,
And then once there is good field moisture, then I would follow up with a planting of oats and vetch using a disc, either a disc drill or a disc seeder, a disc air
yeah,
seeder.
yeah,
Um, so yes, I guess I'm probably got more of a plant focus than
yeah,
everybody else.
yeah.
Um, and I
No,
see
that's
plants as the answer to pretty much every problem.
Yeah, great. Yeah, no, plants are a key part of the solution, and that's, I guess, the one of the key principles of regenerative ag is working with plants rather than seeing them as something that I've got to try and fit them into the soil, but they can actually help you change things themselves.
Yeah, so
Simon, thank you very
that
much for that. I'll pull it up because of time, and also it's still a little bit hard to hear you, although I got that a bit better. But thank you very much for that. I guess, the core thing that came out of that is, for me, is this extra level of attention to detail when you're doing multi-species tactics, that you really have to think through your paddock operations, your machinery, your sowing tactics, because there are some nuances to it when you've got mixed species of different seed sizes, soft seed, hard seed, etc. So there's some tips and tools there that I know Simon's extremely experienced in. I'm just going to stop sharing, everyone, and sort of formally pull it up at this point, because I think we're just 5 minutes over time, if I've got it right. We got through it almost on time. Sorry that we had to sort of speed up the last couple of guys there, Simon and Nakala. There's a few questions in there, some of which we might just tackle one or two, and then everyone else, we might just have to come back to your questions. But one way we might do that is in the next Hubcare session, or we might even just send out some answers from everyone. We'll have a think about it, Shelley and Nicola, I guess, because we have run out of time a bit.
Yeah,
We
we've
might.
probably only got one question in there at this point in time.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
from see there.
Yeah. So Missy's put in a question. I'm curious to hear about your thoughts on using silver pasture systems for growing fruit and nut trees. At our farm, we're experimenting with silver pasture, which integrates trees, pasture, and livestock. Yep. And in new case, horses and chickens that supports animal health and tree productivity. Citrus. Do you know any farms in Australia that are successfully using silver pasture for fruit and nut trees, multi-generational? It's the first time we looked at regen. Um, yes. So, Missy, there's not a lot of people doing silver pastoral systems with fruit and nut trees as well, or where they're using fruit and nut trees in with pastures. I'm just trying to think, because I've kind of been around Australia looking at agroecology for a long, long time. The one that's really famous is timber trees with merino wool. That's the Taylor family in the New England. They're kind of like the champions. You might have heard of them, Missy. But in terms of integrating fruit and nut trees into it, in Australia, I'm not aware of anyone doing it large scale. Certainly, there's some permaculture and sort of permaculture inspired farming systems that are doing it pretty well. But if you're looking at the next scale up, then there's probably not a lot of models in terms of farm planting design, orchard design in Australia, but there is in the US. There's quite a well-known silvo pasture system where they're using fruit trees in that design, which we can get you the link to if that makes sense. But happy to chat more about that if you like, because yeah, that's a bit of a passion of mine too, for sure. And the question about castings is the other one I'll try and tackle. Where is that one?
Yeah, no, just Susie put in how much castings, what the rate
Oh,
is.
yeah. And you've given that answer.
Yeah,
Cool.
250 to
Yep.
300 kilos per hectare is
Right.
our
Yeah.
recommended rate.
Yeah. All right. So yeah, it's a kind of big topic, everyone, and this was the first of us for trying this. What is regenerative? Welcome to regenerative agronomy. I guess our thoughts were that like agronomy is a really important part of modern agriculture, and agronomy is a comprehensive skill set, and people do agronomy in different ways. Different agronomists tackle, how they do their agronomy quite differently. The reason that's important is because you guys as farmers and graziers make decisions and spend money based on what your agronomist recommends. If they tell you to buy gypsum or they tell you to buy castings or they might tell you to buy both. So, you can spend a lot of money based on the way your agronomic advice has been presented to you. And so you want to know that it's going to be effective. And there's different types of agronomists. I guess regenerative agronomy tries to take a focus that looks at the paddock as being an integrated holistic system. So everything is interacting with everything else. And, what plants are growing and how they're growing actually has a big influence on how the soil functions and how the conversion of energy from the sun and into plant material for you to make money off. Plants are actually a key partner, and I think that's one of the main messages of regenerative agronomy, and that the microbes and all the living part of that paddock, we don't want to just kill it. We want to encourage it. We want to encourage diversity. So a plant-centered approach, if that's the jargon I'm supposed to use, vegan agronomy, where we're supporting diverse microbes and diverse biology is probably the common ground. And then dealing with the soil will be quite context specific because there's different soil types with different soil constraints and different fertility issues. And we've got different types of crops. So the benchmarking for crops can be quite different in terms of nutrients and things. So hopefully everyone can kind of see that regenerative agronomy, there is a lot to it. We've touched on a few big topics around micronutrients, sap testing, how you get more diversity into pastures, whether they're intact pastures or new pastures, or do I want to speed till into bare ground, or I just want to oversow. These are really big topics with quite a lot to them. So maybe they're things we can explore in the future Hubcare sessions when we get further into it. So thanks everyone for attending. Thanks to NutriSoil for hosting it. And thanks to our Regen Rockstars, also known as Regen Agronomists, for giving us their 2 bulbs and coming in. Luke, Robin, Simon, and Nikala, thank you very much. And we'll look forward to seeing everyone in the future. And I'm sure the guys will send some follow-up. So Shelley, I'll hand back over to you.
And thank you to you, Dave. Great job. You did pretty well with the time. And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll send everything out and all the different attachments and everything. So keep an eye on your emails the next couple of days.